This episode is sponsored by Linode. Linode is offering listeners of this podcast a $20 credit, which is good for 4 free months at their lowest plan. Their plans start at 1 gigabyte of RAM for $5 a month. You can get your servers in any of their 10 data centers, and their high memory plans start at 16 gigabytes. Get a server running in under a minute. They do hourly billing with a monthly cap on all plans and add-on services like backups, node balancers, Longview, etc. VMs for full control, running Docker containers, encrypted disks, VPNs, etc. You can run a private Git server. They provide native SSD storage, 200 gigabit network, and Intel E5 processors. They have 24/7 friendly support, even on holidays, and a 7-day money-back guaranteed. So go check them out at linode.com/RubyRogues. Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Ruby Rogues. This week on our panel we have Eric Berry.
Hey there.
Dave Kimura.
Hello.
David Richards.
Hello.
I'm Charles Max Wood from devchat.tv. Quick shout out if you're into React. We are doing React Dev Summit coming up, so check it out. We also have JavaScript Dev Summit coming up, so check that out too. We have a special guest this week, and that is Jacob Stoebel. Jacob, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. I'm a Rails and JavaScript developer, and I'm here glad to join the show.
Awesome. Do you want to just give us a brief rundown where you work, what you do, why you're world famous, favorite flavor of ice cream? I don't know.
I work for a remote company called ePublishing. We're basically a platform for people who want to host, or for publishers who host any number of different publications. And I do mostly front end for them, but we're in a little bit of Rails as well. I guess what I'm here to talk about is I gave a talk at RubyConf 2017 about something called the critical response process, which hasn't really ever been thought of I've never seen written about in the context of code reviews. But I think when I looked at it, I felt like it was a really great framework for understanding and thinking about how we give feedback to one another as developers. It was an interesting sort of experiment to sort of think about how I could apply this. That's hopefully we can have a conversation about that.
Awesome. I think when you filled out in the form, you said something about code reviews, and I kind of want to expand that a little bit. Are there other places besides code reviews that we give this kind of feedback that we could do better on?
Yeah, and I have to sort of caveat all this by saying I'm probably pretty lucky in the career I've had so far, which is that pretty much everyone I've worked with so far has been really generous and just incredibly kind in giving me feedback. And in going to conferences and just talking to people, and if you ever are at a conference and want to have just an icebreaker, and I want to find a way to sort of get conversations started with people, to say what do y'all think of code reviews? Because you will hear so many stories from people about code reviews, but also just feedback in general from other people in this industry that have frankly just not gone well, or not been productive, or in the worst case been counterproductive, and leave people feeling what's the word? Just with a bad taste in their mouth. To answer your question, I think that can go for code reviews where we're really trying to get tangible feedback, actionable feedback on something we're trying to merge into the code base, but also just in terms of general mentorship. If you were to go to your supervisor or someone who's more senior than you and say, I'm really wondering, what should I learn next, or what can I do so I can grow in my profession? That can be a really vulnerable thing to ask, because at its root, you're asking what am I not so good at, or what could I grow at? And I think there's really great ways that you can answer questions like that. And I think there's really not so great ways that you can answer questions like that can really be harmful to a professional relationship. Because, and I say this in my talk, and like one of my points is that as developers, we are a creative profession. We're not making art with a capital A, but the reason why we do what we do is because we're hopefully pretty good at being creative, like taking a problem and thinking about it creatively and a creative way to solve it. And one of the points that I try to assert is that if we're not working in an environment where we have at least a baseline level of trust for our colleagues, creativity can get really hard because we just don't know if we're going to be met with a bunch of negative criticism or be mocked or whatever else.
So what led you to this topic? Have you had really bad experiences in feedback?
Again, like I've only hit pretty much 99% and definitely 100% at my current job, which I've only been at for a couple of months now. I've had great experiences. However, I'm a career changer. I used to be, believe it or not, a high school drama teacher. And it's a long story how I went about changing that, but that's not really the point of this. But the reason I came about this is because this is this thing called the critical response process, and it was founded by a woman named Liz Lerman. And she actually is a dancer. She comes from the dance world, and she was looking at the way artists give and receive feedback from one another. And she found that it was particularly in her world, the dance world, it was incredibly harsh. And I use that word intentionally. Like there was this framework that feedback can only be useful if it's harsh, so that idea of like, I'm being brutally honest with you. And that's the only way you're going to learn. That's the only way you're going to get better. And she took this, Lerman took this idea and she said, wait a minute, what if it were possible to be both honest without be honest and nice? So, I can give you the feedback you need to hear so you can grow. But also I can do it in a way that's going to make you feel like you actually want to go back to the work and do better at it. Not because I've been beaten down and sort of like coerced into doing it better. But it's like, I'm excited. It's like, oh, I can't wait till I can sort of go back to this and make it better. And so I learned that in a completely different career. And when I transitioned to this career, what actually got me started on this talk to begin with was I read a tweet. It was from a joke account, and it said, "Code reviews can be honest, nice, pick one." And that's funny, but I got to think about it. It's like, well, why can't code reviews be both honest and nice? And I thought about it some more, and I was like, code reviews can be nice and they can be honest, but really, it's not about one or the other, right? It should be both, but really, it should be about inspiring the people who made the code to like want to go and make it better. So it's like if I give you a code review and you spent a whole week just hacking on this project with my team, and I go and submit a PR and I get a code review, and it's like I've got thousands of lines of code that I wrote, and I got 5 people piled onto it and are really marked it up. What's the nature of like how they marked it up, and did they give me feedback that's basically like lots of little nitpicky things about my style or about things like that? Or did they ask questions that made me think like, oh, that's actually a really good idea. I'd like to go back, and it's giving me ideas about how I could maybe drive this up, or I could cover some corner cases that I didn't think about. And it really makes me feel like I'm collaborating with the people who are giving me feedback. And I use one of the examples of bad code reviews that I use in the talk is like the firing squad, right? It's like you bring your code and up to the wall, and all the people who are going to review it are basically like, I'm going to try to shoot as many holes into your code as possible. And
I'm going to win.
And if I can't, yeah, it's adversarial, right? It's like it's almost like a it's like, if I can find any problems with your code, then you have to go back and fix them. And if I can't find any problems, then you can merge in your content, right? And so it's like, it's this idea like the only way we can arrive at the best code possible is by fighting with each other. And it's not to say that like some teams work well by sort of like collegially, is that a word? By in a collegial way, debating with one another, but sometimes that doesn't work. And what happens is the supervisor or the person who's been there the longest can really sort of take advantage of a situation, and they can really sort of start leveraging power that in kind of a toxic way. So, yeah, did I answer your question?
It does. All right, so we're gonna try this out real quick now. I'm gonna lean on your drama experience, and we're gonna do a little bit of role play. Okay.
Okay.
All right, you guys ready for some role play? Okay.
Or if you have me singing again, Eric, I'm gonna slap.
No singing, but we're gonna do role play. Okay.
Do I have
Here's
a safe
scenario.
word?
Right? Here's the scenario. Jacob, you and I work together. I just submitted a PR to the repo that basically changes every word with the word cat. And I think it's the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
And you come back and give it a negative review, or you review it, and I come to you. Okay, here we go. Ready? Scene. Jacob, why'd you screw me over, bro?
Well, hey, like, I wonder if we could just sort of sit down and have a talk about. Question: am I playing like the bad code reviewer in this, or am I playing?
Oh yeah, let's see the bad code reviewer first. Jacob, what's your deal? Why do you hate cats?
Oh well, obviously, did you read the style guide at all? Cats obviously shouldn't be in this code review, in this code base. Go back and read the documentation. You need to start all over.
Dude, I spent like 3 days on that PR. I changed every cat word by hand.
You should have asked me first. I don't know what to tell you. Sorry.
All right, good. All right, now.
I love the RTFM. That's awesome.
All right. Here we go. Good cop. Dude, why'd you hate on my cat review? On my cat PR? Okay,
so can I, Eric, I have some questions I wonder I could start out with. My first question is, what ideas were inspiring you to change V to cat?
Well, I recently got a cat named Fuggles, and it's awesome. And so it had me thinking of cats, and because it brings me so much joy, I figure everybody else should have joy.
Oh, that's great. I really appreciate like the desire to bring more joy to the code base. We are Ruby after all, right? So I really appreciate that. If I could just pause that, like one thing that I would probably do is I would want to know from you, what are your questions for me? Is there anything you're dying to know about this PR that you would like feedback on?
Well, you said that cats don't belong in the code base, so I'd like to know why you think that.
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually a really good question. It says here in the docs that we're not supposed that we have to follow this style. But you know what? That's from 4 years ago. I'm not sure why. Why do you think it's still relevant? Or do you think that's do you think the style guide is out of date?
You're probably right. You're probably right. Cats probably don't belong in there.
Oh, okay.
All right, I'll go back and change it. Thanks for talking to me.
Yeah, have a good day.
I was laughing a lot on mute, and I was glad I had mute so you guys could finish. That was a lot of fun. But if I replace cats with the pattern of the day, right, or whatever the thing du jour, the jam du jour, it happens. That thing happens. Like, why did you do that?
Yeah,
and try to not tear them down. That was really good.
Yeah. Well, so there's 4 steps to this response process. The first, and they come in a really specific order. So the first, and I sort of tried to do this, is that as the responder, and I guess it wasn't really relevant in this talk or this scenario, but as the responder, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to sort of, before any kind of judgment or evaluation, I'm going to sit down and I'm just going to list for the person I'm giving a review for, what was meaningful about this. So like an obvious thing would be, it's like, it's meaningful that every single instance of V was replaced by cat. Right. And you know that the important thing is that like, I'm just saying it was meaningful. I'm not saying it was good. I'm not saying it was bad. It just stood out to me. After that, the next thing that happens is that Eric would have gotten the chance to ask his questions about like, okay, I've submitted this PR, but this little bit here, I don't know. Is it a little hacky? I'm not sure. And the purpose of that is that it's putting the author or the creator in the driver's seat, right? They get to sort of kick off the conversation by talking about the things they want to talk about. And the reason is that the process sort of trusts that the people who made the thing know about it best, right? And they know they know how to steer the conversation in the directions that it needs to go. It sort of trusts that. So those are the first two steps. After that, then I, as the responder, get to ask questions. But, and I tried to model this here, the questions can't be a opinion disguised as a question, right? So I asked the questions like, tell me what thoughts you had with what ideas inspired you to change V to cat. That's just like a question. And the reason is that like, as the responder, my first job is to understand the work or like the work that they did before I go and start giving a hot take about it, right? How many times have you had people that sort of piled onto a PR or whatever else, and you're like, how much do you actually understand that? Like, did you just look at it for 5 minutes and start mocking up things, or like, so it's like my job to actually understand it a little bit better. And then after all of that, then I can give an opinion, but the opinion has to be consented, right? The responder has to say, yeah, I'll take an opinion about X, Y, Z. So the way it would work is I would say, I have an opinion about the find replacing all the words the with cat. Would you like to hear about that? Can I tell you about that? And they could say, yeah, like, I think that would be useful. Or they could say, no, I don't really need to hear about that. Like, that's not necessary. There's a big asterisk to that I'm sure you might be thinking, which is like, okay, does that mean my supervisor doesn't have to, or I can say no thanks to my supervisor's opinions? And the answer, of course, is like, no, you still have to listen to, you still have to listen to your supervisor. You still have to listen to your team. But I think it's possible to have like a setup of like an understanding with your team or your supervisor ahead of time, where you can say, this kind of feedback is in bounds in the scope of what it's about or when it's given. Like maybe feedback at Friday at 4 p.m. not good, and this type of feedback is not in bounds, right? Like don't ask about that, or don't ask about that now. Hold off for later, right? And it just sort of helps guide the conversation a little bit. And that's basically how it all works, right? Is like it's basically giving us a roadmap for how we go about talking about all this stuff, because it's not easy, and I think it's really possible for reviews to sort of get off track.
The thing that I like about this is that you can talk about it, you can kind of come to a place where you understand each other, and then the next time you have the conversation, you got this context, right? So it's, maybe it's not, replacing all the words the with cat, but maybe it's something like, well, I switched the whole API over to GraphQL, or, some other hot technology, right? And so now we've had a conversation about it. We have a wider conversation with the team. If we're making major changes to the API, we need to run it through this process. And it just opens up the whole conversation to that, so everybody understands how this works, and nobody's demonized. It's just, okay, apparently we needed a conversation about this, so we're going to have it.
And everyone on the team has the backstory. It's like, well, we had a REST API going, and my gosh, it was really a dumpster fire. It was falling apart, and so blah blah blah, and for these reasons, this is why we decided to move in this direction. Not everyone necessarily agrees with it, but everyone knows the backstory, so we don't have to rehash that every single time. Exactly.
Yeah, and we know what the conversation looks like next time.
Yes.
So that there's not just a unilateral decision on it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this whole thing would root out the passive aggressive. Like if it doesn't get talked about, if we're not upfront about it, then like, hey, wait, I really like REST, right? No, we're going to go GraphQL. And so then a month later, oh man, if you guys had only stuck with REST, whatever the argument is, right? That by avoiding the conversation, we avoid the opportunity to move together and actually get everybody moving in the same direction.
Yeah. How many of you have had a coworker or a collaborator where they, every time you had a meeting, they brought up the same topic, even though you thought it was decided, right? They don't do it mean. They're not trying to fight, but they bring it up every single time. And because I have, and
not me, never.
Many years, yeah,
no. Yeah. And I've been that guy, and I've also had those people.
Yeah. And
I'm judging all of you, by the way.
That's right.
And really, it's not just that one person, right? It takes a whole team to say to allow for that conversation to sort of spin out every single time, as opposed to saying like, no, we talked about that already. We're not going to talk about it again. It's decided.
Yeah.
Well, it's also fair to acknowledge, and I think David did this a little bit. We all have our sacred cows, right? And so that's that. When he's the guy bringing it up over and over again, it's because it matters to him. And and if you acknowledge that and then refer back to the decision, it's not telling him he's being bad. It's just telling him we've already made that decision, but we acknowledge that it's important to you.
Yeah.
Well, because it's this weird twist where to be a good software developer, we've got to develop knowledge and abilities and opinions and be good at that. And so to be a good software developer and to not necessarily go in that direction as a team, we've got to have some safety valve to say, yeah, okay, so we're not going to do that, but it's not necessarily a bad idea. Just we can't because I've worked on a project once where we just had everybody was super senior, a couple decades of experience. When the project was done, we had, I think, 2 people leave to be CTOs, one left to be a director. Everybody else left to be like managers. We were all just devs building something, but really good people. And so we really had to be careful about that. Like, if somebody is saying something, they probably have a decade of experience behind what they're saying. It's not like just thrown out as an idea. And so being able to listen to each other and get everybody working together, that turns out was harder to do. It was kind of comical and bad sometimes. But, so it seems like man, if we could have just, had this in my head, it would have gone a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's like, well, we've got all this knowledge floating around, and it's not going to, and also a lot of personal, professional experience floating around. That's not going to perfectly overlap. So it's like there's a lot more of sort of stuff to iterate over, and sort of examine to feel like you've covered everything. So yeah, I could see how that would be more complicated.
And then it's not so much just getting a code review done, but getting a whole team moving in the same direction, which is really what I think code reviews do really well. Get everybody moving in the same direction.
Yeah. And I just love the idea of like a code review that sort of makes me excited to go back and fix my work. Because I can leave a code review feeling like, because I'm relatively junior, right? And I could leave a code review feeling like I'm really shut down, or it's like, oh, do I even belong in this job? Am I like, did I somehow trick them when I got this job? Or I can leave a code review feeling like, oh, I didn't realize that I could even do that with this code base. And now I can just move that into this method. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's so much easier. Right. And like, and just feeling like, oh, I love this job because I feel like I'm being mentored with every comment.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And For me, I think that there's a lot of things that can be done prior to a code review even happening to mitigate and I hate to use this word, the confrontation that occurs within a code review. If you have someone, like in your example, Eric, changing all these to cats, and that wasn't discussed prior in a planning meeting or something, then you're off, doing your own thing. And even in greenfielding projects, there is still some kind of plan or direction that was decided that you want to go on with the project. Whether it's up in one person's head or a team has already discussed. So I think, staying on target and having good communication with one another could mitigate those kind of things. And if it's an open source project, maybe if they have a Gitter channel or Slack channel or something, hop on there and discuss your idea before you start putting forth a lot of effort. And also with doing things like making a bunch of different kinds of changes, if the project has a CI/CD pipeline where you can have brakemen running to check for any kind of static code analysis security issues that you might be introducing, you can run those yourself to see prior to even asking for a code review if you are opening up a bunch of very well-known security issues. And also with Rubocop, have a style guideline that a project has determined that this is the style of this project. If we want to have a change, if we want to go about it a different way, let's get together and have a chat about it. And then we'll edit it into the Rubocop YAML file, and we'll use that as our standard going forward. So having all of these things in place will help mitigate a lot of the confrontation that can happen on a code review. And when you submit for a code review, if you have it much smaller and condensed, not one pull request or whatever, that's thousands of lines, because I'm not going to read that, honestly. I'm going to skim over it, see if anything jumps out, and I'm like, either going to pass it or saying, we need to hold off on this feature, release it later. We need to dig more into what's going on here. But regardless of all of that, I think one of the most important things, and I watched your talk, Jacob, that I forget the 3 points. You can either be nice, be honest, or be inspirational.
Wait, I think the idea is hopefully you can be all three. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the only ones that really matter are being honest and being inspirational. Being nice, I think, can go out the window if the team has established that I'm a good person. I love the team that I work on, and my team members know that no matter what I say, I am really trying to help them and to lift them up in what they're doing. No matter how I say it, if they know that at the bottom of their hearts, if they know that I'm approaching them with love, then I can leave the niceness out of the code review because they know that I'm really trying to help them. I'm not out to get them. I'm here to help them and lift them up.
Yeah. I mean, I think nice is sort of a more surface level behavior, whereas being inspirational, or like you said, lifting up my teammates, is a much more substantial pattern of actions that I can do with my team. So yeah, I agree. I think nice could be a nice byproduct of working with my team, but I think you're right. I think it's not necessarily the goal we're after, the thing we're after.
I think when you're talking about nice and whether or not you need it, I think what you really need to come back to on that particular conversation is values, right? So our team values security. That's why we're going to run Brakeman. Our team values efficiency, and so that's why we're going to run CI and all that stuff. Our team values thoughtful communication. Whatever, right? And so that's how we're going to approach the code review. And so if we're looking at these values and everybody's on board with the values, then it's not, oh, I'm going to worry about your feelings. It's more about, these are the values we have, and I'm going to, since we're all on board with the values, we're all going to collaborate and make sure that our code and our communication reflect those values. And so, if the nice, warm, touchy-feely stuff isn't in your values, but clear and thoughtful communication is, then you may say something that somebody doesn't want to hear, but it's understood because of the values that's the way we approach some of these things.
Yeah. And I think I also get into this in the talk. I think what you're saying, Chuck, is definitely true. It's like I should be more interested in lifting up my team than sort of niceties, right? The other end of that spectrum that I mentioned in the talk is like this idea that as long as I am supposedly only talking about your code, there's no way that I'm out of bounds and you shouldn't take it personally. So like the way on the other end of the spectrum is tearing people down, supposedly in the name of better code. And you recognize it with the phrase, don't take this personally, but your code is junk. I think that it's like that can really open the door to a lot of toxic behavior, because it's built on this notion that like, as long as we're only focused on the code, we can't possibly be out of bounds. Which isn't true either.
Do you run your own freelance business? Or maybe you're thinking about picking up some business on the side? Well, then you need FreshBooks. FreshBooks is the quickest and easiest way to get invoices out to your clients. It's easy to use. It works anywhere, available from any device, on the desktop, iPhone, iPad, Android, and all of your data is backed up and secure. And it makes it really easy to get organized and get paid. You'll be tracking time, logging expenses, and invoicing your clients in no time. You can also save time billing, freeing up several days per month to focus on the work that you love, and you get paid faster. FreshBooks customers are paid on average 5 days faster because there's a link on the invoice that says pay me now. And it's a great way to grow your business. Plus, FreshBooks is offering a 30-day trial. That's right, 30-day trial if you try them out. So go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section. Once again, for a 30-day trial, go to gofreshbooks.com/devchat and enter devchat in the How Did You Hear About Us section.
The problem that I have with that, honestly, is it should be taken personally, because we should be wanting to lift each other up. And if you say don't take it personally, I hear that as, you know what, I really don't care about improving your skills as an individual. I just want these 3 lines of code to be proper in the way I see fit.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And really, like, a lot of that stuff is usually sort of it can usually be stripped away. So it's like, so you don't take it personally. When I people who are saying don't take it personally, I often feel like they're taking it personally, right? Like, so it's like, oh, don't be emotional about this, but I'm going to scream at you. It's like, well, you're being emotional about this. So like you've started down this sort of toxic wormhole. Yeah.
So what do you do then if somebody is going to take it personally? I mean, some people just cannot take feedback. Even if you sugarcoat it and wrap it up in pillows and all that good stuff. Here's some marshmallows, here's some candy. We'd like this changed just a little bit. They're just not going to buy it.
Yeah. I am not a manager. And I think it would be cool if someone sort of did another talk that's sort of geared at managers, because honestly, and I think I said this in the talk, is like this framework doesn't have like a contingency plan when there's bad actors involved. It sort of is assuming that everyone is playing fair and is sort of is bringing sort of their full generous self to the process. But I think you bring up a really good question, or a good point, which is that like, if people aren't going to receive feedback well, they probably, it's going to hurt the whole team, because then the rest of the team won't like give them feedback. And then what happens next, right? They might not be included anymore. And then all of a sudden you've got this team member who's dead weight because you can't give them the most important projects. And, it's not good.
Yeah, again, I'm going to bring this back around to values really quickly, though, because, again, it's like, look, we can't live out our values if you're going to take it personally. And it's not personal. We're just trying to live out our values. We're just trying to do the job that everybody agreed on. And it's hard because some people are going to look at that. They're going to say, well, then fine, I don't belong here, and they're going to leave. But sometimes that's what it takes. And then sometimes people are just going to get on board. And so I think if you clearly communicate what you're after, then the people who leave because they don't agree with what you're after, it's probably going to be a good thing for your team. And I hate saying that because I hate the idea of confrontation with people over stuff that's not, tangible like the code. But when it comes right down to it, everybody's happier when everybody's on board with what you're working for.
Yeah. And, if that messaging can come from everybody on the team too, right? So you can say, like, as the manager, it's good if as the manager I'm asking all of my team to live out our values, but it's even better if, like, I'm inspiring everyone on our team.
Yeah.
So every single person on the team can feel comfortable pulling aside that one problematic person and saying, like, hey, I want you to know you're new here, but I want you to know, like, we really try hard to accept feedback graciously because XYZ, because of our value. Like, so everyone can live those values too.
2018 is the year of the code review interventions.
Well, one thing I think is really fascinating about this conversation, because I'm looking at, like, as a junior developer, I had a really hard time with feedback. Like, why was that? I felt like I was a poser and I didn't belong there, and I was struggling. And I think about that now that I look back. We have a name for that. We call it a neurosis. So we develop a neurosis when we overreact to the environment, when something in the stimulus happens and our reaction is bigger than what's happening. So if I give you feedback on your code review, you can't take feedback. Something's going on there. There's something else in the mix. It's not just, okay, it's a bad actor, or the person's just not fitting our values. I mean, this is true. What you guys are saying is true, absolutely. But they've developed a neurosis. And until we can be direct with them, until we can show them, hey, look, this is what's going on. This is what you need to be able to handle to be trusted with the big projects, to do the big features. We want you part of this. That they don't get better. They just realize, they just keep spiraling in the wrong direction until it gets really ugly. The pick that I'll give later in the thing in the show today is a book, and it starts with an example of that, where they just sugarcoated feedback until they had to fire the person, and then the guy was like, "What on earth? I've only heard good feedback from everybody. Nobody told me. Why didn't you tell me? I could have fixed this 100 times, 1,000 times if this was a problem." We have to hear that. I think people have to be willing and able to work together.
Yeah, and they have to be approached as, really they shouldn't be. You shouldn't wait for the quarterly, job review, right? Like, a lot of these things can be pretty small. There's like, hey, we show up to meetings on time. We have to show up to meetings on time. Please do.
And I don't know if this is a true breakdown of the word, or if it's just one of those nice things to remind me, but I like the word honest, to be one with what is, est being what is. And maybe it's just a reminder, like, yeah, if I have to wait for a quarterly review to be honest, then I'm not honest for 89 days out of the quarter. And so, yeah, I need to show up on time, or somebody needs to tell me, or I need to tell somebody this is not working for me. Because that's painful. Because now it feels like, okay, they knew that I wasn't pulling my weight, and nobody cared about me enough to tell me that I've got to figure this out. And now, how could I ever be part of this team? Now I've got a big problem when I had a little problem before.
Definitely.
Well, and if you know those things are important, you can tell people that when you hire them, and then they can decide, you know what, that's not for me.
And that's where those values are really valuable, right?
Yeah, imagine how much effort that'll save you.
Well, I love that, because especially if you've got a place that stands for something, hey, we're this, and everybody gets it. Like, man, I do not fit in, or, oh, that is just me, all 100%. That makes it so much easier to just, everybody moving in the same direction.
Yeah. So one thing that I'm wondering about here is, so you're talking about kind of understanding where people are coming from, but how do you get to that clarity? Because a lot of the code reviews that I see fall apart. Usually there's some miscommunication somewhere. So how can you make sure that you're being clear on the way that you communicate about all of the stuff that we're talking about here?
Yeah. Did I get in the way of your?
Nope. Go ahead.
Record that? Okay. So I think again that framework of the 4 steps in the critical response process really helps, right? So the very first thing that happens is the second thing that happens towards the beginning is the people making the code review get to ask their own questions, right? They're going to start the conversation by asking, what do you think about this or this? And it doesn't necessarily have to be once the work is ready for a final PR, right? It could be as they're getting started on the project, right? Like, how should I go about this? Or something like that. When I gave the talk, someone actually shouted out a really great idea, which was that how often have you, when you make a PR, commented on your own PR before sending it to anybody? Because that I feel like is a really great way to get the conversation started and you asked about like how do we not spin out of control? Like how do we like guide the reviewer towards here are the bits that I suspect are going to be problematic, right? Like I'm removing this dependency. I want you to know I'm removing this dependency. I think it's going to be okay, but I want everyone to make sure because it could be bad if there was something I didn't catch. And then after that, when people get in step 3, it's the job of the reviewers to first make sure they fully understand what's going on. I mean, how many times have you reviewed a PR and you're like, I think this is okay, but
literally every time.
I was going to say, you've watched me doing this. I think it's right. Kind of.
Yeah, so
please. The test
what
pass?
If there was a code? Yeah, the tests pass. I don't see any missing semicolons.
So here's my review. Are you smarter than I am? And the answer is always yes. Okay, I'm sure it's good.
Yeah, so like what if
even if it's not reviews? Even if it's not, you know that part of the code way better than I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you just wrote it.
What if
go ahead. Anyway, sorry.
No, what if like we said, when we start this code review, I want you to give me a tour. Hopefully your PR message is going to give me a tour of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And please point out the things that you're not sure about. Point out the things that might be problematic. And then similarly, like, what if we said, like, please, like, we're going to have a round in the PR where you're going to ask, the reviewers are just like going to ask any questions that they came up, because like, I'm seeing this bit. I'm completely unfamiliar with this part of the code base. Can you just tell me what's going on here? And then, and like, I don't have any judgment yet. I just need to know, what does it do? I could look it up, but you could probably tell me much faster.
Mm-hmm.
And then like everyone's empowered to give much higher level feedback.
I really like that. I do something really similar. I think I'm going to expose some of one trick that I do that has worked well for me is I play stupid, and I just go really slow and pedantic, and I'll wave my hands, draw pictures, tell a story, and I draw it out, and I explain, I think this is happening this way. And I don't try to sound like I'm the smart person in the room at all. In fact, I just, and so this would happen. And then I and it's sometimes painful, somebody to have to listen to me. And then they'll sometimes push me into shortcut that, no, it's because of this, and I want you to know this. And then I'll just say, what about if, and I just go down the condition tree of all the things that could go wrong. And pretty soon, even if we can't cover everything, I've taken my time and I get a sense that they've thought through the same logical branches that I'm thinking through. And now I know that the code quality is good, the tests are good, and then I'll comment on it. Looks like you've tested on everything. And I'm not really checking the test as much as I'm checking their response if they squirm. And then I think, okay, let's look a little harder at what tests are missing. Because just being what's the guy that with the lazy eye, the old TV detectives that with his
I got to look that up now.
I know, right? I played this guy that he just plays dumb until the
Peter Falk.
Peter Falk, yeah. And,
Columbo.
Yeah.
I play dumb until the murderer confesses. And now we've got a good code review because they're able to be honest with me and I'm able to understand where they're coming from. Anyway, that's something I've tried before that I try actually often, especially if it's a non-trivial code push. I make it sound like it's a lot more fun than it is. Probably people hate it, but
no, I mean is it the is that like the aristocratic method? I think it's like
Socratic.
Socratic method. Excuse me. Yep. It's like you respond to every question with another question, and like let's see how deep we can take the dialogue by sort of just continuing to ask questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I tried that with my 3-year-old. Like, well, why'd you draw on the wall? I don't know. Well, why don't you know? He's like, I don't know. And that's usually where we end up in our recursion endless loop.
Yeah, I don't think there's never a base case with a 3-year-old, I guess.
Well, what I like about Socratic method is that it can be done gently. Mm-hmm. It can be done really not well, but it seems to fit really well with the steps we have here. Questions can just draw people out instead of beat them up.
And I think a lot of times you can find answers to your own self. The self-awareness. You learn so much more when you have that epiphany or self-awareness of what is being asked and answering it instead of them calling you out saying, why is this done like this? Well, now you have been brought attention. But if they say, hey, can you explain kind of what's going on here? And you come to that own awareness that, oh, this isn't right. I should have done this, or it's going to cause this speed issue or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and I think what you're talking about there is, there's a difference between the Socratic method and, leading questions, with an obvious right answer. And the one is somewhat condescending, and the other one is, I really want to understand what your thought process is, and I don't have a right answer necessarily to give you. And so, hopefully we can go on this discovery journey together. And if you come through that and you make that the way that you approach your Socratic method, it's very, very effective.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw this tweet as well. Someone put a tweet in the notes. The toxic conflict often arises when different people are solving different problems that they think are the same problem.
That's awesome.
I've also heard the analogy of like, if I'm having a dialogue with somebody, and you can think of like a dialogue with somebody as like putting a horseshoe on an anvil and hitting it with a hammer, right? And a good dialogue is when I'm putting the horseshoe is like the thing we're talking about. And if I manage to get the horseshoe between the hammer and the anvil, I'm going to properly shape it between like our two ways of seeing it. Our two conflicting ways of seeing it are going to shape the metal in the way we need it. But if I miss the horseshoe, then all I do is hit the anvil and I get sparks and nothing happens, right? And so the idea is like, I shouldn't be trying to target myself at the other person. I should be saying, let's put our two viewpoints, let's put the topic in between our two viewpoints, and let's see if we can turn the metal the way it needs to go.
Mm. I like the analogy.
Yeah, it's the judo. It's managerial judo. Let's just take that energy you've got and the energy I've got and see if we can get it going in the same direction. And
cool.
Yeah, I like the anvil. Yeah. Well, the thing is too about it is that it's a lot less threatening to me if you've got good energy and you're doing something good, and I've got good energy and I'm doing something good, and we're not quite aligned yet. But it's just, okay, the two vectors are not quite going in the same direction. So let's just talk about that a little bit. It's safe to adjust. Yep. As long as it's safe to adjust a little bit, then it's safe to grow, and we're going to gain. We're going to multiply each other. So
yeah, definitely.
Well, you know what happens when you have two vectors going in the opposite direction at the same magnitude? You get zero.
Yes, so you got to get it going in the same direction.
Yeah. Or relatively in the same direction, so you can always at least be moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I have an old colleague, and I've worked for enough time that I've worked with a lot of people. But I've got this one guy, we get together every week still, and we have this yes and conversation that we have honed. So it's so perfect. He can be coming out of left field, and I don't know what he's coming. What on earth are you doing, dude? And I was like, yes, and then I go with something he's got, and we collaborate really well. It's safe for us to be wrong, and it's safe for us to disagree, and it's safe for us to adjust because we just play that yes and. We don't throw the but. We don't have the two vectors going opposite each other. So yes, okay, I see what you're saying there, and what if we did this? And back and forth. Oh man, that's gonna. So I don't usually start with like, oh man, that's gonna take too time, or too long, or are you crazy? Like, oh okay, that's cool, but well, I threw it in a but. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? But like 10 years, 12 years after our projects are done, we still want to work together all the time because we learned how to work together well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think I said this in the talk is like I think. Really great teams and really great working relationships, they follow this framework of critical response process, but they don't have a name for it because they don't need a name for it, right? It's just something that they do. Everyone else, for the remaining 90% of people, I think that the intentionality can be really useful. But if you're in a great working relationship with your team, you probably don't need this. You're probably doing great anyway.
Well, I'm thinking about this guy I've worked with that was fired once, and I met him a year or so later, and it was hard for him, because the little adjustments weren't made. So I mean, things can get they can go really bad really fast if we're not willing to be honest with each other. And then all of a sudden it's just, well, we're going to fire you, or I'm going to quit. What? How is that the first response?
Yeah. The word that keeps coming to my mind, and this is going to bring up different images for different people, but the word is intercourse. And usually we use that word for something else. But it's a word that really means an intimate interaction with somebody, and it can be a verbal communication thing. And if you can't get to that level where you're actually having intercourse, in other words, I'm throwing my idea out and you're throwing your idea out, that's not intercourse. But if we're actually getting into each other's brains and really, digging into what and why, and this has come up a couple of times, that's the level we need to be doing this at, because otherwise, we're just shouting past each other. And we see that a lot with a lot of these, political issues, or, people dig into, the reasons they believe certain things religiously or other ways. And we don't get to intercourse. We just get to yell at each other. And so, all of these techniques that we're talking about, I mean, that's what it is. It's getting to that point where we can understand each other.
Yep. Right on.
And what's sad is when there is usually the conflict, the two parties don't realize they are actually fighting for the exact same thing. They just have a different family of origin viewpoint or whatever of how they would go about solving it, or what they think would be most effective. But they're fighting each other like they're enemies instead of working together. There will be compromise here and there, but they're not working towards a solution. They're just fighting each other. It's frustrating when seeing that happen in codes or politics or whatever it is. But we see it all the time.
Yep. And what does that cost us?
Exactly. You're on the same. We're having intercourse, aren't we, Charles? Chuck? Because what does it cost?
There goes our clean rating right there. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah.
Because we're both thinking, what does it cost us if we won't do that? What does it cost us? It's incredibly expensive, and it's getting very expensive very fast. The cost of development is high, and so we've got to know that we can handle this professionally.
Absolutely.
There was an interview that David Rosenstein gave on Freakonomics this week, and he's worth billions of dollars, and he runs the world, and he's an amazing guy. And he says that he always gives an interview where you can see the person's face because he wants what Chuck is saying we need to have. And I think that's really affirming, that if people that really have realized what matters in life, at least for them, for him to be successful in his private equity firm, and to be able to work well with people, he's got to really read them and pay attention to them. And that's really important to him. He'll go to great lengths to figure out where somebody's coming from and read them all the way and pay all the way attention. And so it's the software for sure, but I keep seeing that pattern that dropping what we're doing and paying attention to each other matters.
Well, you say it's software for sure, but where does the software come from? It doesn't come from the computer. It comes from the people who wrote it. I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it is my the software I wrote, the code I wrote is is an expression of my understanding of the world, or the world of the problem that I'm trying to solve. And I think I said this is like, it's not easy. It's not, I don't know if it's possible to completely separate your feelings. I don't like that word. That's not exactly what I mean, but it's like separate yourself from the way you see the world, right? Like that's a deeply connected thing that you have with another person. And so I think that this idea of like, well, if like the idea of there's just one objective idea of what the best code is a little hard to pick apart, because it's like, it's how I saw the world. It's how I think this problem should be solved. So
yep,
absolutely. I guess I just have another book. There's a book called System as a Thought, and it makes Jacob's point that feelings and thoughts are connected. The way that we think about things is affected by the way we feel by them. So, for example, I'm picking you up at the train station. You're late. You don't call. I hate you. I hate everything about you. I just want to tear you apart. And then you show up. Oh man, you wouldn't believe it. There was this guy who had a heart attack, and I was first responder. And we handled these things, and I was just really involved and emotional. And so I didn't even think to call you, but it's so amazing he lived. And okay, great, wonderful. You weren't disrespecting me. So the way I think about a situation is absolutely influenced by the way I feel about it. And then those thoughts, they continue to get harder and harder and more codified. And we put them into software, we put them into standards, we put them into practices, agreements, all this unspoken part about the way society works. That's just the growth of those thoughts. They exceed our immediate grasp. And it's a great book, by the way. I'll count that as one of my picks.
You mentioned something there, David, that I think that could go on for a whole nother hour of talking about, but there's something called perceived intention. So in that example that you had, the person picking up the friend, they perceived that their friend had no intention of being there on time. And it doesn't matter what that person was doing, good or not. Your perception of the situation or circumstance is that they had no intention of being there on time, that something else was more important. In another human's life, absolutely. I would understand that. But there is still that perceived intention that you were less important than the saving of someone else's life. And that's okay. That's good to have. But we have that perceived intention in everything, in code reviews. So if I'm getting upset at you, then you may perceive that I don't like you. And it doesn't matter how I'm coming across it. And I think this can be used to tackle kind of what you guys were talking about by the person who does not take criticism well, is that for whatever reason, they are perceiving you as just attacking them. So I think that, as you guys were saying, with asking questions, bringing out, letting them have that self-discovery of the issues or gaps in the code can change their perceived intentions, maybe back onto themselves to see, what were they thinking or what were they doing, instead of having the negativity that even though you're not causing it, they're still perceiving it. And I think that in many ways can hopefully be avoided.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Geez, guys, this is getting deep.
This is fun.
Yeah. Do we have any other thoughts or ideas that we want to share before we do picks? Yeah. Well,
I think we can do picks.
I think so too. Yeah, I think a lot of this conversation has centered a lot around the idea, though, of just, a lot of times we forget that there are people involved.
Mm-hmm.
And
definitely.
Yeah.
We need to keep that in mind, because that's actually what we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah.
Definitely. And it's not just because we have fragile egos, even though we do.
Yeah.
But it's because there's a positive to be gained in all of this too, is that we can actually advance one another and lift one another up, because when every time we give feedback, or we can do the opposite.
Yeah. But that's the thing that's amazing, is that if I lift you up, it doesn't push me down. And so, that's the real power is, you got better because I shared something with you, but I didn't actually give anything up to share that with you. And so there's a net gain in the system, be it just on our team, or maybe you learn something from me that you go share in a conference talk, and now it's a net gain for the whole community. It gets really interesting really quickly as far as, okay, so what is the real impact then of me making a difference for you, or you making a difference for me?
Yeah, totally.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and do some picks. For you, the listeners of Ruby Rogues, Loot Crate is offering an opportunity to save 10% on any new subscription at lootcrate.com. Just enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings. Loot Crate is one of my favorite things. Every month I get a box in the mail, costs less than $20, and it comes with all kinds of goodies. I have stuff from, just looking at my shelf, Batman, Spider-Man, Ninja Turtles, Back to the Future, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, and much, much more. So if you're a geek, a gamer, anything like that, and you want cool stuff to put around your office, cool t-shirts, comic books, etc., then definitely check out Loot Crate. To save 10% on your new subscription, go to lootcrate.com/Ruby. Again, that's lootcrate.com/Ruby to save 10% on any new subscription. Enter the promo code BRIDGE10 for 10% savings. Dave, do you have some picks for us?
Yep. Yeah, sure. So the first pick I just came up on a whim and it's from Ernie Miller, and it's Humane Development. And you can find it on humanedevelopment.org. It's basically, we are people developing software for people. So, treat people as people and software as people, and all that good stuff. It's a really neat site, very small site. And the other thing is, I got another power tool. So I come on here, I like to talk about my power tools and stuff because they're fun. Picked up a DeWalt 18 gauge pneumatic brad nailer. That thing is so much fun. I tell you, I just went through an entire round of nails, just sticking it into wood and stuff, because that one was so much fun. I have the larger, what was the other ones? Finishing nailer and also a framing nailer. But this little tiny one is so much fun. I love it.
Yeah, you love that. Ka-chish, ka-chish, ka-chish.
I do.
Yeah, I have a tool addiction as well. David, what are your picks?
So 2 books for me. I'm a reader. I like to read. So I've mentioned Thought as a System. It's by David Bohm. He's a physicist, and what he did is he took some university students to his home for the weekend, and they just talked, and they recorded the dialogue and talked about things about feelings and thoughts and standardization and where it all comes from. And it fits coding really well, fits our conversation today really well. And then the other one is Radical Candor, and it's about the same thing we're talking about as well. Just being able to be honest with people, combining our ability to challenge directly with our caring personally. So if we can care personally, we can challenge directly, we can be radically candid and create the kind of outcome that Jacob's bringing up today. Both great books and short books.
Eric, what are your picks?
I've got one pick that's maybe not appropriate for this group, but my pick is the Phoenix framework on Elixir.
Yay!
I've been recreating Code Sponsor in Phoenix, completely open source. So it's at github.com/codesponsor/web. And I'm doing it all in Phoenix, and I'm blown away by the speed and power of this. And one of the things which is super cool is the ability to create background jobs without having to run a second process. That's just amazing. So anyway, pretty excited about it.
Nice. I'm still working on that Elixir podcast, so I'm just going to keep an eye out for it, folks.
Let me know.
Well, welcome to the dark side, Eric. It's a wonderful place to be.
It's quite a light side.
It is.
Very, very bright over here.
I need to start a show called Ruby Trader.
Still love Ruby. I still use Ruby all the time.
No doubt.
Yeah, I know. I have to give you crap if I can.
As long as we're not intercoursing or whatever. You can give me crap as long as it's not during intercoursing. So we're good.
There we go. Have some Ruby Elixir intercourse, huh? All right. Well, I think that's as close to a dirty joke as we're going to get today. Anyway, I'm going to jump in here with a couple of picks. So I keep hearing interviews by a guy named Jordan Peterson. And he's written a book. I guess he's written a couple of books, but the one that I keep hearing about is 12 Rules for Life. I haven't read it yet. But every time I hear him talk, and he just talks about like personal responsibility and meaning in life and things like that. And I've just been really, really impressed by his interviews. So I'll probably post some YouTube videos and stuff. But, and I fully intend to pick up his book. But yeah, just really, really terrific stuff. Another book that I'm going to pick, I listen to a lot of books on Audible, is The Whole Brain Child. It's a parenting book, and it just kind of helps you understand psychology of kids. And I have kids ranging from 2 to 12. And so just seeing the way that they describe things and helping them kind of, connect the dots between their left brain and their right brain, depending on how they're reacting to something or responding to something has been really interesting. And I've been trying to find opportunities to show my kids, you're analyzing this critically, but you're leaving out the human emotional component, or vice versa, or what's a creative way to solve this instead of a literal logical way to solve it. And anyway, just making me think about the way that my kids think has been really, really constructive. And it's also I've seen a few things in myself that I'm like, I kind of do that backward, and has made me think critically about the way that I think, even though it's kind of geared toward kids. So really, really enjoying that as well. And those are my picks. Jacob, do you have some picks for us?
I should do. The first is a book. It's about this critical response process that I talked about. It's by the creator. So it's called Liz Lerman's Critical Response Process, a method for getting useful feedback on anything you make, from dance to dessert. And it's really just a very sort of practical sort of handbook on the critical response process. It's really thin. It's probably less than 100 pages long. And it gives lots of really small, concrete examples of how to give and receive feedback using this framework. And what's really fun about it is it uses the idea of like the creator is a baker who has made a cake and is asking their friends for feedback on their cake. So I highly recommend that. Pick up a copy, and it just sort of gives you all the resources you'd want to sort of get started. And then the other is another talk that I saw at RubyConf when I was there in RubyConf 2017. It was one of the keynotes. It was called Growing Old by Chad Fowler. It was really interesting because he talks about his sort of thoughts about working with legacy code bases. He talks about what we mean when we talk about a legacy. It was really interesting because in every other human endeavor that I can think of, the idea of a legacy is like a really positive thing. But somehow it's become this euphemism for old and clunky and bad when we're talking about software. And he really sort of spins out that idea about what we really mean when things are growing old, and what we can do to not let them die. And what does it mean for a code base to die, or what does it mean for it to be alive? So really interesting talk that you should check out on YouTube.
Definitely. I love hearing Chad speak, so that I'll have to go check it out. If people want to follow you, maybe you have Twitter or GitHub or, some other place that you put what you're thinking about, where do people go check that out?
Yeah, I am pretty much everywhere. I'm J Stoebel, so Stoebel. I mostly retweet other people on Twitter of just sort of interesting things about the intersection between writing code and working with people. And I would love to talk to you on Twitter. I'm on GitHub. I have my own webpage. I'd love to hear from you.
Very cool. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks for coming and sharing this with us. I think it's interesting when we start talking about communication, instead of always necessarily talking about the technical end of what we do. So,
yeah, thanks for inviting me.
All right. Well, we'll wrap this one up, and we will catch everybody next week.
All right.
Bye. See ya.
Thanks.
Bye. Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.